Okay, so here we have a typical Sunday morning in our house while Brendan is throwing things around, and we continue to try to get our housework done despite the fact that Brendan has his own agenda. Hello. Hi. Yes, thank you very much. Oh, okay. And so here we have our house, which is lovely. We're very thankful to have gotten it, and it's a pretty nice neighborhood in Northeast Portland. There we are. Yeah. And we're about to get in the car and go for a little drive. And so this is near my house, about a mile or so. This is a pretty typical fall day for Portland. It's a little bit overcast and there's lots of colors. The leaves have turned nice and brown and green and gold. And this is the middle school closest to my house. And this school serves as a bilingual school. You can see right there in the window, it says Nuestra Escuela Scott. Lots of Hispanic children here. And here on the wall of the school here, it looks like there was a mosaic here, but a lot of it has been kicked away or worn away. And it looks like it said something there in Spanish, but I can't make out what that means. And then equally on the other side, there's a mosaic that a lot of it's been chipped away. And it says "Welcome" in Spanish and in English. And it's quite beautiful, even though some of it's been damaged. This is my wife Alice. And she is a former news presenter or reporter, right? What do you want to call yourself?
I was a reporter.
A reporter. So she's been on television lots of times, so this should be pretty fantastic. All right. She is from Guernsey, which is where?
Guernsey is a British island, but it's much closer to France. It's about 40 miles off the coast of France, of northwest France, in the Bay of St. Malo near Normandy and Brittany.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you come to the United States?
Well, about 4.5 years ago, I gave up my job and I sold my house and I went traveling. I was going to travel for about 8 or 9 months and go to various places. And after I'd done some traveling in Europe, I decided to visit the US, and I picked the West Coast as a region to visit. When I came to Portland, about 4 days into the trip, I went to Powell's Books and I looked around the bookshop, and then I went to the coffee shop, and when I was looking for somewhere to sit, a guy kept looking at me, and I thought, well, shall I give him a chance or not? And I decided I would, so I sat down opposite him and waited, and of course he started talking to me. And now we're married and we have a toddler.
And so, how did you come to being a United States resident?
Well, there are a few different variations on how you would come to be a permanent resident of the US if you're doing it via your relationship with somebody. So, what they regard as immediate family would be either your spouse or your child, or I think possibly your parent if you're under 21. But in my case, I did something that's a very common way to get a green card, which is through marriage. And really, the immigration system is set up so that you either have to come to the US and get married very quickly within about 90 days and then go through the process to transition to be a permanent resident, or you have to get married outside the US and the US citizen spouse returns to the US, and it can take many, many months to get permission to finally be reunited in the US and get your green card. So, given that I was already in the country when Chris proposed, when we looked at the options, it made most sense for us to get married quickly and do the green card process after that. So we got married about maybe 10 weeks after we got engaged. And then immediately after that, we filed the paperwork for me to get a green card.
And how long did that take?
Green card took about 5 months. It took slightly longer than it should have done because there were some issues with my fingerprints getting rejected, so I had to go back and be re-fingerprinted. But in general, you know, that 5 months is fairly good time for the US immigration system. That's about as fast as anyone will get their paperwork through. Some other types of visas can take years. So people who apply for immediate family visas get basically a privileged status. They get fast-tracked, and there isn't a cap in the way that there is on many other kinds of visa for people coming to the US. There's no limit on how many people in 1 year can get family visas. With other types of visas, it's quite common to have a start date each year. They give out as many visas as are available, and they stop until the following year. So people can basically have to rush to get their paperwork in at the right time of year to try to get the visa, or they wait a whole year extra before there's another opportunity.
And how do you think how much more difficult do you think it would have been to get a visa had you not come from the EU, from the European Union?
I think it would have certainly subjected us to more scrutiny. In theory, the type of visa that I got does not discriminate based on the nationality of the person who's trying to get the green card. But in reality, as a Western European coming from a wealthy democracy, there isn't the same incentive for somebody of my nationality to fake a relationship just to get into the US, either for economic reasons or for safety or just for chances that they couldn't get at home. All those chances are available to me in Europe. So there's therefore, since there's less likelihood that a British person would fake a relationship just to get into the US, they are correspondingly less concerned that your relationship might be a fake one just to get a visa. I certainly think that if I had been from Latin America, that there would have been a lot more scrutiny of whether this was a real relationship or not. Being European, I think there was very little skepticism about the nature of our relationship. We really didn't have to work that hard to prove that we really were a couple.
And what about culturally adjusting to life in the United States? How has that been?
Well, in terms of language, of course, it's a massive advantage to be a native English speaker. And certainly I think I couldn't have started work as soon as I did and been able to get a professional level job if I hadn't been a native English speaker. It would have been a lot more difficult to do that. Not to say that British English and American English are identical, so there's been a learning curve there, but it's been relatively easy on the language side. In terms of culture, there's quite a lot of difference between British and American culture. I think people might tend to assume that because we speak the same language that we are very culturally similar, and we're not that much. I mean, there are some similar values that we share about freedom and democracy and the role of women in society and how family life works. Those kinds of things are pretty similar, but US culture is people are much more forward here. So, for example, one thing I really notice is people will stop you on the street to ask you a question, and they will just launch straight into their question. They won't excuse themselves for interrupting you first, because here that's acceptable, whereas where I come from, it would be very rude not to acknowledge the fact that you've interrupted somebody by speaking to them.
Like by saying excuse me.
By saying excuse me or something like that. So that's quite disconcerting still, because I don't realize people are always talking to me when they start talking to me, because they just wouldn't just start talking to me at home. So that's kind of symptomatic of the fact that people here will talk to each other more and talk to strangers more than they will in Britain, which can be a good and a bad thing. It's a more openly friendly place, but I think also there can be a kind of superficiality in that everybody's very friendly, but not necessarily more than just a bit friendly.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Certainly, workplace culture is different here, in that my experience has been people don't make friends with their workmates to quite the same extent that they do in Britain, where there's a lot more expectation that you will socialize outside work with the people you work with than there seems to be here.
And so, and very briefly, to what extent do you think that you have a cultural advantage or disadvantage living here in the United States as compared to someone that might migrate from somewhere else?
I certainly think I have an advantage. I think people never make an assumption that I might be here unlawfully. People are generally pretty nice to me. Even people that I know don't have a very high opinion of immigrants in the US, because they see me as different, because I'm a native English speaker and European, and probably because I'm white as well. Where I think if I were not all those things, that I might get a different reaction from people and an assumption about my education, my qualifications, my professional experience, my English skills. There would be a lot of assumptions made, I suspect. It's hard for me to say since I've never been other than I am, but I definitely think that you get a fairly easy ride as a Western European, and even maybe treated better than Americans. There is a lot of stereotyping here of British people as being very articulate and well-educated, well-spoken kind of people. So I think people actually assume that I'm going to be, in some ways, more capable than an American.
Okay, thanks very much.
You're welcome.